Janice and Ashley had always ruled the hallways of North Ridge High. They were the kind of girls who turned heads when they walked by, their beauty and wealth giving them an untouchable aura. Everyone wanted to be them, or at least be on their good side. Their friendship was a force of nature, binding them together in a whirlwind of gossip, parties, and laughter. But there was a darker side to them, one that few ever dared to challenge. They thrived on finding weakness in others and exploiting it, playing with people like they were toys, discarding them once they were broken. Sabrina had been their target for a long time. She was the school's ghost, the girl no one really noticed unless they were pointing or whispering about her. Her thin, stringy black hair always hung like a veil over her face, hiding her pale features from the world. She never spoke unless forced, her voice barely above a whisper when she did. And she carried that doll everywhere. It was ancient and creepy, with cracked porcelain skin and eyes that seemed to follow anyone who looked too closely. No one understood why Sabrina was so attached to it, but they made sure to mock her for it. On that particular day, Janice and Ashley were standing by their lockers, laughing about something trivial, when Sabrina passed by. Her hunched figure shuffled down the hall, the ratty backpack slung over her shoulder looking like it could fall apart at any moment. Janice's ice blue eyes flicked toward Ashley, a silent, wicked agreement passing between them. They loved tormenting Sabrina. She was the perfect victim, never fighting back, just enduring. With a quick motion, Janice lunged forward and grabbed the strap of Sabrina's backpack, yanking it hard enough to tear it open. Books and papers spilled out onto the floor, and then the doll tumbled out after them, landing with a soft, sickening thud. The fragile porcelain cracked audibly as it hit the ground, the doll's head snapping off from the body. "Oops," Janice said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she bent down, picked up the doll's head, and held it aloft for everyone to see. A crowd was beginning to gather, curious and entertained. "Look at this," Janice mocked. "Sabrina still plays with dolls. What a freak." Ashley's laugh cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "Maybe she talks to it at night." "What do you think, Sabrina? Do you whisper to your little friend when no one's looking?" Sabrina stood frozen, her cold, dark eyes fixed on Janice and Ashley. Her expression didn't change. Not even a flicker of emotion crossed her face. She didn't even try to retrieve the broken doll. But then, she did something that sent a ripple of unease through the gathered students. "I will not leave you," she whispered, her voice low and almost inaudible. But it wasn't the words themselves that chilled those who heard them, it was the way she said it. There was something unnatural in her tone, something dark lurking beneath the surface. For a brief moment, the laughter in the hallway died down as an uneasy silence settled over the scene. Janice rolled her eyes, unfazed. "Whatever, freak." She tossed the doll's head to the ground and crushed it beneath her heel, grinding it into the tile floor for good measure. The crowd broke into laughter again, the moment of tension forgotten as they dispersed. That night, Janice awoke with a start, gasping for air. She was standing by the school's swimming pool, the moon casting an eerie glow over the still water. Everything was silent, unnervingly so. Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around, her senses on edge. The pool's surface looked like glass, perfectly undisturbed, but there was something wrong. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing in on her like she was trapped in a nightmare. Without warning, something cold and wet wrapped around her ankles, yanking her down into the water. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The freezing water closed over her head, pulling her deeper and deeper into the inky blackness below. She kicked and struggled, her limbs flailing uselessly as the cold consumed her. She was an excellent swimmer, but her body felt heavy, as if the water itself was dragging her down. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred, and the icy fingers around her throat tightened. Panic surged through her, but just as she thought she would drown, she bolted upright in bed, soaked in sweat, her hands clutching her throat. It had been a nightmare, but it felt too real, too vivid. Across town, Ashley woke up in terror as well. Her bedroom was filled with thick, acrid smoke, the air so hot it was hard to breathe. Flames licked at the edges of her bed, crawling toward her, eating away at the blankets and sheets. The heat was unbearable, and she could feel her skin blistering, the pain so real she could almost smell the burning flesh. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come. The flames roared higher, swallowing her whole. She woke up, gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat. The sheets were twisted around her like they were trying to strangle her. She sat there for a moment, trying to calm herself, but the terror wouldn't fade. The next day, Janice and Ashley met in the hallway, both pale and shaken. They didn't talk about their nightmares at first, both brushing it off as a coincidence, telling themselves it was nothing more than stress or a bad dream. But the memory of Sabrina's words echoed in their minds, gnawing at them in a way they couldn't shake. A few days later, the accident started. Ashley was driving home with her boyfriend, Danny, late at night. They were laughing and joking as they cruised down the empty road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. But then, without warning, the brakes gave out. The car skidded wildly off the road, veering into the gravel shoulder. Danny fought to regain control, but it was too late. The car crashed into a ditch, flipping over, glass shattering and metal screeching as it crumpled. They crawled out, shaken but alive, both too stunned to comprehend what had happened. That same day, Janice was at swim practice. She dove into the pool, the water cool and familiar around her. But as she swam, something grabbed her ankle, pulling her down. She thrashed and kicked, trying to break free, but the grip tightened. Panic set in as the water thickened, her lungs filling with liquid. She was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper. Her coach had to drag her out, saving her just in time. As she lay on the pool deck, coughing up water, she saw Sabrina standing in the doorway, watching her. "I thought you could swim," Sabrina said, her voice soft, mocking. "Who's the freak now, Janice?" Fear started to eat away at them after that. The nightmares got worse, the accidents more frequent. They couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. Sabrina was always there, watching them with her cold, expressionless eyes. No matter where they went, no matter what they did, she was there. By the weekend, Janice and Ashley had reached their breaking point. They couldn't live like this anymore. They had to confront Sabrina to end whatever curse she had put on them. They found Sabrina's house on the edge of town, an old, dilapidated building that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The windows were dark, the paint peeling, and the air around the house felt heavy, oppressive, like something was watching them. They knocked, but no one answered. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the house was cold and silent. Dust hung in the air, and the floorboards groaned under their feet as they wandered through the dark, narrow hallways. They finally found Sabrina in a back bedroom, sitting in an old wooden chair. In her lap were two dolls that looked disturbingly familiar. One had blonde hair like Janice's, the other dark curls like Ashley's. The dolls' necks were twisted, just like the one they had broken. "What the hell is this?" Janice demanded, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" Sabrina looked up at them slowly, her eyes gleaming with a cold, malevolent light. "You broke my doll," she whispered. "Now I'll break yours." She began to twist the neck of the doll in her hands, and as she did, Janice screamed, her own neck jerking violently to the side. Pain shot through her body, unbearable, as if invisible hands were crushing her throat, twisting her head. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Ashley clutched at her neck, too, her body convulsing with pain. It felt like something was snapping her spine in half, tearing her apart from the inside. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," Sabrina said, her voice soft and mocking. "And I always keep my promises." With a final, sickening crack, the doll's neck snapped in Sabrina's hands, and Janice and Ashley's bodies went limp on the floor, their eyes staring blankly into the void. Sabrina stood, leaving the broken dolls on the floor beside their lifeless bodies. She walked out of the room, her face as cold and expressionless as ever. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the distant echoes of their final screams.